Okay, let's make a start. So this session is new business models and the internet. Hope you're all in the right session. I'm Caroline Greer, so I work for a company called Cloudflare. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but I guess in fitting with this workshop, it's a relatively early, new stage company, 6-7 years old, quite innovative, we think, fast growing. So established when our two co-founders came together at Harvard Business School, had an idea, went to San Francisco, set up the business, and now we're operational globally. So we do web acceleration, web performance, and cybersecurity. So we have DDoS protection tools and a CDN type service. So yeah, a little bit fitting. I think it's always interesting to me about where some of these new internet business models emanate from and how a company grows. So I'm co-moderating with Erica Mann, who I think probably is quite well known. She is, amongst other things, an ICANN GNSO counselor, also works for Covington. So we have no panel, so also a very innovative session, a bit experimental. Let's see how it goes. Hopefully Eric and I don't have to do too much work. But the idea is that you are all panelists in of yourselves, so get ready to participate. We want this to be as open, as free flow as possible. That said, we do have a number of key participants that have been identified to help stimulate the discussion at certain moments in time when they feel it most appropriate. So those people are Mark Bohannon from Red Hat, Christian Borgreen from CCIA Brussels. These guys are all in the front row here. Gonzalo Lopez Barajas from Telefonica, and Konstantinos Komaitis from Internet Society. Thomas Grobe, I think, was instrumental in pulling this panel together, getting the speakers together. He was the focal point. I think towards the end, we're going to spend maybe 10 minutes. He's going to sort of talk about some of the key takeaways that we got from the session, some of the summaries. He'll be doing a report. I think this will inform the reports that then will be produced as a result of the session. We also had a subject matter expert, Frederic Dunk from ISOC, but unfortunately he couldn't be here today, but I think he also helped pull the panel together. We also have Ashish, who is our remote moderator, so to the extent that we have any online interventions, we'll take those as well. So yeah, very free flow. What we want to do to start with is maybe frame the discussion a little bit, put some context around it. This topic could go very broad, very wide, and that's okay, right? I mean, we can have a very broad discussion. But to try and put some frame around it, Erica is going to start talking about some new established businesses, players that we see on the market already. So a lot of companies that you're all very familiar with that we've probably heard of. And then talk about some new players that are coming into the market across the globe. Identify some new technologies and trends that we're seeing. And yeah, I mean, I think overall the point is that really a lot of new business models are data-driven. So in some way, it's innovative use of data or information. I guess the question to be posed maybe at the end is, are there other alternatives to this type of new internet business model? Difficult to see them at this moment in time, but maybe some people have some ideas there as well. We're having this debate in Estonia, which, as you heard this morning, super innovative, very digitally savvy region, country. Why is this the case? I think it's maybe towards the end of the discussion, we look at the environmental factors around what is encouraging certain regions or countries like Estonia to be so innovative. I mean, is it the policy framework? Is it just a mindset? Is it an educational scheme that's starting from, school age? Is it the scale of a country? Need to look at sort of different logistics, different business models, responding to maybe an incident that's maybe triggered some need to become more innovative. So yeah, that's kind of the high-level stuff. I think I've covered the intro. So maybe hand over to Erica to kick off with some of the framework stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. Caroline already gave a short introduction, what we would love to do. So this is a very short introduction into the topic. And we did a quick check this morning with a report you all want to probably have a look at. It's the Mary Mika report, which just came out for a few weeks ago. And when you just type in Mika, Internet Trends 2017, it will pop up immediately. It's one of probably the greatest resources each year, which gives you a fantastic overview about the industry. And by the way, it not just gives you a good overview about the industry, but it tells you as well what is missing. And sometimes what is missing tells you more than what you find there. For example, you will find some missing data, little data about Europe. You find nothing about the domain name industry, for example, which is already indicators about how the industry is actually observed. So have a look at this. So we thought it would be nice to look at two phases. So one phase we call the new established players, which is probably all of you here in the room. And then we love to talk a little bit about what we call the new kids on the block. Some of them are not really new anymore, neither, but at least it gives you some kind of impression about what is going on. We're not going into the details because we have the experts here, and we assume you are all expert in one way or another, so it's not our role to do this. So what do we call the established new business models and the new established players? For example, Skype, Spotify, from the game industry, Rovio, you might know less, King.com, players like Alibaba, players like Baidu, players like WeChat, of course then the more well-known, Facebook, Google, Amazon, eBay, but even a company like a car manufacturer like Tesla. So there are many models one has to look into, which we know already well, which are on the market for quite a while, and which we either use or we have heard about. And then, of course, there are the older ones, but this is the previous generation, the telecom operators, which moved into this business as well, some more than the others. Who are the new players? So we looked at some of the more interesting trends. Blockchain, for example. There are some big players, there are some small players. Some of the models are not even tested. In some markets, in particular in firms which work more in logistical environments, the blockchain markets are probably already better tested. Artificial intelligence, sometimes in combination with virtual reality or augmented reality, sometimes standalone. Virtual reality is certainly already more on the market. Artificial intelligence more behind the scene, tested more in professional environments. Drones on the market and sometimes even used for commercial use already. Driverless cars. Healthcare environment, in particular the wearable technologies which people wear, but for diagnostic as well, in particular environments where they are used on the more individual way, so not less in the environment for hospitals, but more what customers use and select individually. Mobile payments, gaming, quantum computing, which is more a topic which probably will take a while before it becomes a market accepted model. It's too expensive simply, so it will take much more time. New partnerships and alliances we see play out sometimes between the established player and between newcomers. Online advertisement, when you look at the Mika report, the one which I mentioned, you will see she reports about a great shift from the more established market to mobile markets, and geo-targeting and what one calls hyper-local, which is the tiny micro-local markets, which are becoming more accessible for users and for customers when they move around streets in their home market or somewhere else where they are. Back to you.
Hey, so what else we not mentioned?
The right one.
Voice, I got it, yeah. Voice recognition, technologies, online advertising you've mentioned. I think the shift to mobile in general, right? I mean, it's really changing how some new business models and new thinking on that. I guess the big issue that sort of confronts all of this is the issue of trust. Eric and I had a discussion before we were preparing for the panel. You know, to what extent is this an issue? Is it an issue in some certain regions, but others it's not? Do we need to work at the trust issue in order to embrace some of these new internet business models? To what extent are these new business models consumer-centric? So are companies responding to a need that they see? or are they almost creating a need that we then realize, oh, wow, couldn't live without this type of thing? So, how are companies approaching that type of thing? Cybersecurity, encryption, close to Cloudflare's heart, of course, but knowing that, encryption, for example, is enabling some of these new internet business models and maybe has addressed the trust issue. We wouldn't be doing online banking, for example, without encryption, engaging in some of the communication mechanisms that we do as well. And finally, I think Christian maybe will touch on this in a report that he wants to bring up, but the extent to which companies layer as they go along. So maybe a company starts with a core product. Over time, they start to layer and build and add new features and services to the product. So that is part of the innovation life cycle, if you like. So yeah, like I said at the beginning, a lot of it is data-driven. I don't think we can escape that, but moreover, it's intelligent use of data. Data is just a raw product. You need to be able to do something with this information and use it intelligently. So maybe that's enough to frame the discussion. We don't want to talk too long about this. Super broad debate, as you can see, and we can go at this from many angles. So does anyone want to kick off with some early observations or comments or thoughts?
Christian, you want to kick off?
Hopefully these work.
I'm not sure if it's actually working. Try. When I tested it, it did not work. Can we get somebody maybe to help us with the mics?
Such a big room also. Okay, it's
Voila.
working.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
I didn't plan to stand up, but here I am. My name is Christian Borgren. I'm with the Computer and Communications Industry Association in Brussels. And some of the things we're seeing, it's a sort of a subcategory of the new kids on the block. It's what we call RIAs, Rich Interaction Applications. And this is a new phenomena that is sort of children of the internet. It's application that's running thanks to the internet, and it's evolving very rapidly. We know different apps such as iMessage, Viber, Snapchat. If you're younger, you probably know more of them than if you're sort of my age or even older. And there's very little academic evidence in terms of these kind of new applications, these RIAs. But there was a study that was released 2 weeks ago by a German academic institute called WIG Consulting. And they looked at a number of these applications around the world in over 15 years. And they found on average that these applications have 9 different features, like online translation, money transfers, chat functions, and etc. And they have a huge impact on economic development. Also, sometimes they have sort of disaster relief or e-health or online education elements to them. So it's really gaining a value for users beyond just GDP figures. But one of the interesting points in this WIC report is that for every 10% increase in the use of these RIA, these rich interaction applications, there was a 0.33 increase of GDP, equivalent of 5 trillion euros. And so it's quite incredible, the benefits economically and also socioeconomically. But of course, the question is, and I think maybe this is interesting to discuss, these new innovation, these new applications, they're very different. They keep evolving, but how should they be sort of considered from a regulatory point of view? Because it's actually quite easy to say, well, it sort of looks like something else we know, and that we used to regulate them for decades this way, but that could easily have sort of a way of killing innovation and killing the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Somebody else want to add or make a different point? Yes, please.
Thank you, Erica. Mark Bohannon with Red Hat. Erica, I want to thank you for that tour de table. My head is spinning from all the dynamics I have to think about here. But I do encourage everyone to read the Mary Meeker report. I've just started going through it. I think it's one of the best ones she's done. And rather than flip through the 285 slides, I encourage you to go watch the 45-minute YouTube that she put up. It's a lot more digestible, a lot more interesting, and she uses the slides very well. I'm with Red Hat. I want to thank Erica, first of all, for not putting us in the category of the old boys that aren't doing anything. We, as some of you know, if you don't know Red Hat, we are the world's most successful company delivering open source software solutions, primarily to enterprises. Our customers are critical infrastructures, governments, large institutions that are delivering a variety of these kinds of services and new technologies and new approaches. we started revolutionizing the software industry about 15 years ago, but we didn't do it alone. We did it because we had an approach to open innovation that drew from the communities of software developers around the world who were doing incredible stuff. We are still very involved in those communities. We feel they are very important to our ecosystem, to our innovation. And if there's anything that I think unites all the companies, almost all the companies that Erica ran through, it is that they were using and are using open source as the way of building out their services, infrastructure, with the goal of trying to create network effects, of creating the broadest array of users that they can to sustain what they are doing. And I think at the heart of this discussion is that we're moving away from a very traditional notion of innovation to one of open innovation, where collaboration is absolutely essential, where we're moving away from the notion that just one company has the best ideas. In fact, the best ideas often come from outside your company. And do you have an innovation ecosystem that fits into that? And quite often the business plan matters more than the technology you have. So this is a great discussion. Look forward to sharing more about that, and thank you for bringing this topic up today. It's very important.
Thank you so much. Just, by the way, one recommendation I can make talking about Red Hat. You put out very early, I don't remember the year, but I posted about it on Facebook. It's on a public post, so you can find it. You produced one of the best videos about what we call the pioneering character of industries, because it makes it's a short clip. It's relatively long, actually. It's about 3 minutes, but it goes through the different phases in industry. So the airplane, the telecom, the railways, and everybody, each time, there was a group of people, typically the established, saying, you can't do it. And this is just fun, actually to watch, because history repeats. Each time something new comes, we will have this kind of dispute again and again. So I think we have to get used to it. It's just part of human nature. You want to wait, or you want to come in, Gonzalo? You come in any time. Yeah.
Hello, thanks, Erica. My name is Konstantinos Komaitis, and I am with the Internet Society. So for those of you who do not know the Internet Society, we are a global organization, and we sort of represent the Internet. We were created by the very people who created the Internet. And I would just like to add to what Mark said. One other feature, if you want, common feature of all these companies is that they operate on a technology that supports permissionless innovation. So this idea that there is really no central authority that you need to go and ask for permission when you want to create something on the internet. The internet is designed in such a way that anyone who has a great idea can put it out there, and then it's up to the market to pick it up and make the best use out of it. And this is a unique feature of the internet that we don't necessarily see in other technologies, and it has allowed all this brand new innovation to come about and all these companies to thrive and change markets, provide new choice to consumers, create new services, and always keep challenging themselves in order to be able to innovate more and more and more. So I would like just to put this out there, because it is very important to understand the technology, but also to understand how the internet would be like if all these companies had to actually go and ask for permission in order to be able and exist. So thank you very much. And
Gonzalo?
Hello, my name is Gonzalo, and I work for Telefonica. We are a telecom provider. We have over 350 million customers in the UK, Germany, Spain, and almost every single Latin America country. Touching about innovation, permissionless innovation, and how the mobile internet is changing the internet, there's certainly a trend that we are seeing is that basically internet is now turning mobile. According to data from Smart Insights, we have seen that basically in almost every country, at least 70% of the time that we spend on the internet, we spend it on mobile devices. That's a figure, for example, for the US, but it's not just happening in the US. In Spain, for example, it's around 69%. In Mexico, which you can claim it's a completely different country and different approach, it's 75%. And in Indonesia, it's up to 90%. But it's not only that we access through our mobile handsets. if we look at the time that we are accessing the internet on our mobile handsets, almost 90% of the time, we're doing it through applications. We're not just browsing we're not using browsers, we're not using the email. We're always using applications that are located in our handsets. And basically, this is having a significant effect on how we use and how we approach to the internet. And one of the first reports that are already commenting on these effects, it's a report from Caribou Digital and from Mozilla, which is called Winners and Losers of the App Economy. And basically, they claim that the permissionless innovation of the internet is changing because basically there are, the editorial process is changed because everybody has to go through application stores, and you are then subject to the terms and conditions of those application stores. And moreover, if you look, for example, of the economy of the internet and how wealth is being distributed, you will see that basically all the applications are produced mainly in China and in the US, and basically all the revenues that are being generated in the internet through those applications are being diverted to those countries. And this effect is even more pronounced in some countries that, for example, do not have PayPal, which is not operative in such countries, in some countries in Africa, for example, which that means then that these applications cannot be really produced, people do not have the incentives to produce those applications because they cannot benefit, as they cannot have access to such payment services. For example, another additional report which I would like to comment, it's a report that was appearing January this year in the New York Times, which is called Clearing Out the Application Stores, Government Censorship Made Easy. And basically the author here claims that governments are pushing on application stores to block access to some applications, so that it's the most easiest way for such governments to do censorship on the internet. So my question here is, if the governments are able already to apply such big constraints to application stores, the power that these application stores have is really, really great. And it's not just seen by these, for example, articles. We are already seeing some movements by governments. For example, Germany already published a white paper on online platforms. We saw last week the French regulator ARCEP publishing a report on what is the effect of handsets on the open internet. And basically, they look at what the effects of mobile handsets is having on the open internet and what the effect of operating systems and application stores is having on the innovationless internet and on the open internet. So I will leave it there.
Very interesting point, particularly on the apps as well, and how they might inadvertently serve as a choke point on the internet. Yeah.
We do have Marco over here. Just please introduce yourself quickly.
Thank you very much, Erika. Marco Pancini from Google. Quite different perspective from the one that we heard like a few seconds ago. In terms of, from our point of view, we are seeing a lot of application booming in Europe. We just celebrated I/O, the success of a lot of European entrepreneurs that, thanks to Android, but I would say, like, thanks to the new apps economy, really can find incredible opportunities and amazing audiences. And you know, that's also why we're investing a lot in campuses in Madrid, in Warsaw, in all over Europe, in order to make sure that these entrepreneurs can meet, can share experience, and can really grow. The point on censorship and apps market is I would like to understand a bit better, but from our point of view is actually the other way around. Actually is thanks to the possibility to work together with important companies like Apple, like Google, application can in a certain sense shield behind some of the best practice that we build in the last years. Actually, the GNI is one of these examples. The Global Network Initiative is something that we launched a few years ago together with Microsoft and Yahoo in order to set some clear standards in terms of respect of fundamental rights that we want to meet in all our platforms. And so, for example, on Android, of course, we stay very, very, very closely to this important principle that we sign, and therefore we won't accept any kind of censorship or any kind of control. That's also why, for example, we are very strong in defending encryption and in finding also the right balance between security and the development of technology. We still believe that encryption is a way to keep services free and to keep to have user trust on this. So I would say that, of course, these are a lot of important challenges, but if we focus on the new business models, we see ourselves more as enablers than gatekeepers, and that's actually how we live our engagement in Android, keeping the platform open, allowing different markets to be present on the platform, and working together with both OEM and carrier in order to be successful as an ecosystem. I don't see this as a conflict between different stakeholders, but I see really like an ecosystem where we all working in order to make successful and sustainable the new business models.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You want to come back? Or do we have somebody else we see in the room? You're all hiding. It's not allowed in this session.
No, you're all panelists, remember.
Yep, remember.
Yes, please, it's Lily.
Mm-hmm.
Louise Bennett, BCS. I see one of the problems that's looming is that people are getting very upset about their personal data being used by other people, and they want to get some of that value themselves, not just the value of the access to the free services. And things like GDPR and the need to get consent to share data, how is that going to affect these business models that are relying on mashing together data from different sources?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You would like to come in, please?
Yes. We have seen on surveys, for example, that around 3% of the people surveyed were not concerned on how their personal data was being used. So that means that we have really a trust problem on the way that businesses, governments, and other parties are using this personal data. And basically, I think that people is concerned about businesses using the data because they don't really understand how the companies are using this data and the approaches that we are having to this data. And basically, companies can claim that with the terms and services, we explain everything perfectly and customers are aware how data is treated, but that's not really true. There are some studies, for example, from Carnegie Mellon, saying that if we were to really look at all the terms and conditions of the services that we are using, we would be spending 75 days per annum to fully understand all these terms and conditions. So basically, we really need a different approach how data is being used by companies. And Telefónica, since basically we are having our customers pay for our services, we are taking a different approach for the data because we don't need the data to make a business model. We are being paid by the services that our customers are paying us. So basically, what we want is to be providing customers with value of the data and be giving them back the value of the data that we are using. And we have launched a program which is called Aura, and it's based on three capabilities. The first one is based on cognitive intelligence, and we mixing this speaking platform with all the data that we have from the customers. We will enable our customers to access all the services and be, for example, adding more data to their plan or configuring their Wi-Fi at home to be, for example, being able to do an access, a guest for access the Wi-Fi at home, or to shut the Wi-Fi so nobody has access, and that would be easily performed with this access to data and this cognitive platform. Additionally, we also will be providing access to the customer's information on a timeline to see all the information that these customers have, what have been changing on the privacy settings, and all the different actions that they have been doing. And a third part is the use that we are going to be providing to that data. Basically, our aim here is that customers are going to be empowered to decide how data is going to be used. And we will share whatever we get from those data, we will share the benefits of those data with them. For example, in Latin America, the banking system is very, very limited. So when people access or try to access to get a credit, they might find that they have very interest rates because they don't have a credit history. So if they were able to provide the information on a credit score from the telecom companies, because we have a very long relation with them, if they would be willing to be providing this information with the banks, they might be able to get cheaper credits from these banks. And that would be, of course, a decision from customers. We, for example, will enable them to access information, for example, on for security of credit transactions. A bank might question us, is this customer actually being, for example, in Tajin? Because I had a credit card transaction, and then we, with the data that we have on localization, we will tell them that, yes, he's close by to the place that you are telling me, or no, he's at a different location. So actually, we will never really share the data, but we will be providing insights to the customer data and only to those that the customers will be enabling us. Another example would be, for example, we have made an agreement with United Nations in order to have studies on how diseases are being spread. So those customers willing to share their location information will be contributing to a model that will help to predict how diseases are being spread. And of course, the most important thing here is that all the data that we are willing to share with these partners is customers, the ones that are deciding which data is to be shared, and we will be sharing some benefits with them.
Yes, hello?
It's working.
I'm coming from Switzerland, private netizen, we could say. I have just a quick question for the gentleman from Telefonica. Is this an opt-in or an opt-out? It means your customers have to give permission for each use of their data, or do you have to secure, did you get a blanket assumption that all uses are okay? Okay. I'd just like to comment on our experience in Switzerland a little bit. There are others here in the room from Switzerland, so they can tell a different story if they like. We have our old post and telegraph operator, which is now called Swisscom, decided it would enter into an agreement with a local publishing company and a third party, and this old public telephone and telegraph company decided it would be okay to contribute all of their 15 or 20 years of customer information to this new consortium with these advertising and newspaper people. And I don't know who blew the whistle on them, but eventually we got all letters saying, if you don't like the Swisscom to be providing your customer information to this new advertising consortium, you can write to this address and you can opt out. Additionally, we have a very old and very respected cooperative grocery chain in Switzerland, which for years has been collecting data of customers at the cash register, showing a particular identification. Their purchases were being recorded. And this company then used this data to help them gauge demand for different products. Then the new CEO, or the outgoing CEO, decided that he would start a customized, personalized rebate program based on this collection of data, which this well-respected company had been collecting for a good 30 years or so, I imagine. And in protest, many people cut up and sent back in their cards, which this company had decided it would now start to use for personalized selling and tracking. The last instance is our National Railway Company. They have just recently changed to using a single identification card with an embedded chip, and they would also like to use this travel information, where you travel from point A to point B, how often you travel, where are you expected to be traveling, and they would like to use this also for their new marketing. So in the context of this discussion here, what are the new business models? What we see is that the dot-com bubble in 2002, 2003, where many of these companies had to survive by changing to a customer data model, is now being followed by some of these older companies, perhaps not Telefonica, but many of the old utilities are now actively selling their customer data or remarketing it as a new business model.
Those are good points, and I think
Well,
to really understand the trust issue, it's how much our consumer user behavior is changing. So are people really objecting to this, or do they see some perceived value in this new service, some new benefit that they can get out of this? Or are they really backing off and saying, no, this is too much for me, I don't trust this? So they're in like the crux, where our user behavior is changing.
Yeah, and I think what we had a pre-discussion to this discussion, actually, the two of us, and we thought about the examples which you mentioned, not precisely about Switzerland, but how the traditional industries actually are embracing these new models. The question is, can it be done in a way that customers feel informed from early on and can decide, do they want to be part of such a model or not? I think that's probably the main part for this industry. How do they do it? Are customers informed, and can they take an informed decision to be part of it or not?
Transparency and control, right?
Your examples are actually fantastic and I'm sure will help shaping this debate and the future, at least for this group, I'm pretty sure here. We have two more. You want to add something to this, or you want us to move on?
Just
the two of you.
Okay. With this Aura platform, basically the customers will be asked if they want to take part. So it's an opt-in, and customers will decide if they want to join. And if they don't say, they will not be. They have to explicitly say that they want to take part into this.
No, definitely not.
No, he's talking about Telefonica, not about the
No, he's asking me about my examples.
No, he's talking about...
Okay, well, in all of these examples which I gave, the customer was not consulted beforehand. They were notified that if they did not want their data to be shared, they could object and write a letter to the company. In the third case with this grocery chain, there was no chance to comment. The company basically realized late in the game that they had made a very bad decision with over 30 years of customer trust, and they resulted basically to denial and cover up and trying to bring in some questionable third parties which said they were treating this data responsibly, but as we say, the horse had already left the barn.
So did this new service take off? Was it successful?
How do you define success?
Yeah. Well, true, but I don't know.
But just to be clear, Telefonica...
I would say in all three cases, each of these companies which had been well respected and had a good reputation lost reputation and got bad publicity. At the end of the day, they may have gained useful customer data which they will now go on to share and generate profits from. Is that a success? You tell me.
I would just commenting on our proposition. Basically, the fundamental base is that customers is empowered to decide if they want to share the data or not. And on a specific basis, it's not a general consent. It will be asked for every single case if they want to do it or not. And if they don't answer, the data will not be shared. So, I mean, our proposition is to empower customers to decide what's done with their data.
Yeah.
On your point before on data protection, and of course we will have, in less than a year, we'll have this very, very encompassing European data protection framework, which I think will be clarifying a lot, and also making even more clear, if it's not clear enough, that consumers need to give their consent. And if not, companies will be given a big stick and financial penalties. So I think, there'll be more clarity there. And your example from Switzerland, they're incredible. Unfortunately, we still hear these examples. And companies who don't take privacy seriously, they should be shamed, of course, publicly. I think, the beauty in terms of the model from Telefonica is that, there should be different models because people want different kind of models for the internet, right? And that is the model. I mean, that is also the beauty of the internet. There are so many different business models, and consumers should have clarity in their choice and what they want to choose. For instance, when it comes to your apps, if you value your privacy, you probably want to have end-to-end encryption. So that is a choice you can have often for free, monetary as a user, then you can have that kind of privacy. And of course, when it comes to online apps, maybe a little bit differently from a mobile provider, but the choice is just one click away. You can just pick, if you don't like that service because you don't like Snapchat one day, you want to use different service, Viber, WeChat, whatever, you can do that. It's one click away. Maybe broadband is a little bit more difficult still to change between different providers. Thank you.
Okay, friends, different topic. What would you like to talk about? You.
I have another suggestion for an emerging business model in the internet. It's face recognition. I was at a presentation about 6 weeks ago for a developer conference, and it turns out, again, this same national railway company is now testing face recognition technology so that their conductors, as they go through the train to verify the tickets, don't necessarily need to look at the card. They will hold up their camera, they will take a picture of your face, and because it matches certain conditions in their database from how you look, they can see if you have a valid ticket for this train journey. I think we will see more. We already have many instances of law enforcement agencies using automatic face recognition in public surveillance cameras to see if they can pick people out of a crowd. We know that there was a little bit pushback a couple years ago with Google Glass. Google is here, yes. When Google Glass was trying to introduce this model that would allow people of all kinds to walk down the street with glasses on, taking pictures of the people coming to meet them, and we already know that Facebook, for instance, is using face recognition in anonymously submitted photographs to determine who is in the picture, even without their consent. So I think that face recognition will be also a very important new business model. How it will be used, I'm not sure, but I think the ability to make a good business and to turn a profit, again, I think will be becoming increasingly clear because it's, for instance, for the train company, it will be efficiency gain. They can send essentially robotic conductors through the train. They don't need to pay their personnel, and they can verify everybody who is on the train using their face technology.
Somebody would love to talk about this? Do we? Yes, please.
I know one company that is face.com. That has
You have to speak up a bit.
Okay, so there is a company, face.com, which is acquired in 2012 by facebook.com. What this company was doing, when you are in a conference, you can actually upload a photo of a guy you want to get the social information about their Facebook page or LinkedIn page, you can think. So, but now this application has been closed by Facebook because of the privacy reasons. So this is how, after some time, some company evolves, some other company can acquire and close that company, these applications. This is one of the thing I want to share about. If something evolves, some different company can also close those applications.
And again, I think it can be good and it can be problematic. It depends on the environment, how it is used, how it's introduced, how customers are informed about it. I personally would love to have something like this if it would make my life easier, but I would want to know about it. I don't want to have hidden agendas which I would not know. But otherwise, I wouldn't be against something like this. Would you want to say something, or somebody else?
Marco is on.
Marco? Oh. Shall I take, and then I come back to you, or you want to go immediately? Go ahead.
So just very quickly, I personally am not sure how I feel about facial recognition, but that's another story. However, the issue of trust, I think, here is going to be key in moving forward, and we will see this demand for higher security and transparency and how all these services are used to increase. Technology is moving very fast, and it creates a lot of efficiency, and I think this was the point behind the whole idea with the train. But at the same time, users are starting also to demand much more in terms of, you're using my data. Right now, you're able to use facial recognition to be able to determine whatever you want to determine. How are you going to be using this? Because, and it's what Erika alluded to, the whole idea that this might be used in whatever sense is not within what is an acceptable norm, it is really dangerous. And we really need to be a little bit careful in, when these technologies roll out, we need to call up those technology companies and understand exactly why they're being, how they're used, why they're being used, and what sort of security mechanisms are there to enable the users to be able to entrust them.
Marco, you want to come in? I'm doubtful it's working.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are a series of considerations to make very quickly, but for example, made the example of Google Glass was not a huge success because it was not maybe the right moment, because there was no like a very clear business model attached to it. We are rethinking now the approach to Glass more to in a business to business environment, and so again, even from this kind of unsuccess, you can learn something, but I want to reassure that we cannot think about the business model in a vacuum, not considering ethical norms, what the user wants, and the legislative framework. So I think it's more a bottom-up process than a top-down. There is no one that can come with an idea and impose the idea without considering these other elements that I made.
Yeah, you've raised a very important point on ethics. I mean, I think data ethics is not a new topic, but it's certainly one that's being discussed more and more. If you look at artificial intelligence or algorithms or anything like this, how do we use these things ethically? How do companies develop these products and services ethically? Yeah. Anybody else? Olivier and this lady, yes?
Oh, sorry. Okay, go first, and then over here. Oh.
Yes, thank you. Olivier Crépin-Leblanc. I'm not going to wear any hat for this question. I'm juggling too many. So it's just Olivier speaking. I have a question that's been going around my head for a while. I don't know if anybody, I guess everybody knows about unicorns, privately held companies that are worth more than 1 billion, that are startups, so they're like less than 5-year-old. When you look at the list of unicorns, there's about 196 of them apparently now. You only have a handful of European ones. And when you look at the former unicorns, the one that went into IPO, there's only one, that's Zalando. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why do we not have unicorns in Europe? This is crazy. So I don't know, maybe somebody's got the answer, but I don't know if it's because of regulation, because if it's legislation, because it does just, or because we just all go to the States if we want a unicorn, I don't know, or to China. But US number 1, China number 2, Europe nowhere. Sorry.
I mean, we have a big unicorn sitting here, even in global scale. I mean, Telefonica certainly is one. But of course, in a phase, an older phase.
Yeah, but unicorns are privately held, so they're not actually listed on the market.
I know, but I mean, still one. Yeah, you wanna? My answer is always investment and regulation, the two probably. Yeah.
Actually, if I may go first, if you look at the investments and the startups, it's about the same as in Europe, but in the US. It's actually when they start growing, when they say, I'm from Denmark, you become big in Denmark, but then you have to go to a new market, you have to go to Germany, to Sweden, to Estonia, and you have to do so many different markets to become big in Europe. While as in the US, you have pretty much one market. So if you make it there, you make it big quickly, and you get the venture capital because the market is plus 300 million. So if you get venture capital, that is the potential market. Whereas in Europe, it's 5 million in Denmark. So that's one answer to it. So the response would probably be that we should have one real digital single market. We've been talking about that for a decade in Brussels and in Europe to have a real digital single market. We're not achieving it because even though we call them digital single market proposals, many of them actually have more fragmentation built into it. And just to give one example, so Skype was built here, like startup folks from Estonia and Sweden, and you would probably not have Skype-type services being created in Europe in the future because the way that regulators look at these type of services, instead of saying, oh, they have 9 different functionalities and chat is just a tiny bit of them, they say, oh, it sort of looks like SMS and texting. And the way that we have been regulating these kind of services is that we regulate them with each telecoms regulator in each member state. Meaning that Skype, where the vast majority is free, they earn so little money because you hardly ever pay for Skype, right? They have to hire lawyers to deal with regulators in each EU single market. So that's going to wipe out these kind of services. They will only survive if they're bought by a rich US company, for instance, which cross-subsidize.
Which, yeah.
I was just going to add, I agree with all the comments so far. I think there's another element which is hard, I think in this context, to get your head around. But if you look at those unicorns, and I think it's important, they are not all the same. Okay, they're a very diverse group of entities, what they are doing, the service and/or product that they are providing. I think that you can probably say that there's also another unifying piece, which is they understood the power of network effects. And I think that I'm not going to argue that the dynamic around network effects in China is the same as in the US. I think they're very different. But I do think that in addition to, I think the other comments about a single market, regulatory environments, though that doesn't really apply to China, as we know, I do think they understood how to get network effects. And that's not something you teach in the classroom. That's not something you have an academic approach to about. But at the heart of, I think, the whole internet transition is we're moving away from a very traditional, 200-300-year model of manufacturing products, getting them out the door. Of course, they will, to a very different model where not always the first to the market win. In fact, many of those unicorns are actually second, third to markets because they learned the lessons of their predecessors who did not succeed. So I think there's an element of network effects that we need to study also, in addition to the regulatory environment risk-taking that I think is very important.
I'm actually going to go back to your question of ethics. Sorry about that. I've been looking quite a lot at the ethics of using fitness monitoring devices, and particularly employers using those devices. And one of the problems is that the other people in the workplace or employers don't always consider if the fitness monitoring device suggests that someone is becoming ill or having, and it's not going straight to the doctor, but it's being looked at by your manager or something else. Do they have a duty of care then to look after that person, or can they just sack them because they realize they're about to have a heart attack and it's going to cost them a lot of money? I mean, that's being a bit extreme, but there are a lot of ethical questions around business models, particularly using any kind of health data to do with insurance, to do with driving, to do with employment. And I don't think that the rest of society, and particularly employers, are really thinking hard enough about that before they get the benefits and the employees get the benefits. But they must have a policy about what do they do if that fitness monitoring suggests that there needs to be some kind of intervention. It's going to affect their ability to work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do we have a company here in the room who is practicing something like this, where information about these devices is practically company-wide shared, or for certain maybe medical departments in the company or so? I never heard about this, but I mean, it's an interesting case.
Or health services.
Or health services, which are insurer,
diagnostics,
or maybe from an insurance side, somebody who could add some flavor to it. Maybe early your observations. Maybe you could.
I'm not going to talk about the employer who I've just been looking at it for, but I can tell you about an earlier one that is quite well known in the health service in the UK, and that was that people were monitoring mothers to see if they had HIV, and it was well known that if a mother had HIV, the way it was transmitted to a baby is by giving birth naturally rather than having caesarean section. But the ethics was said at first that it wasn't fair to tell the mothers and get them upset about the fact that they've got HIV and they didn't realise. And then people said, no, this is completely wrong. That our duty is to protect the child. So you must say that and give them at least the option to have the caesarean section rather than a natural childbirth. So that's, I think, an enormous ethical question, but that's one that's in the past and in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know, and certainly it will become an issue, in particular if you don't have duty of care provisions involved. Thank you so much for this example. A new topic, somebody wants to go back to one which is already raised, please.
Yes, I'm Fabian Rosdahl from the Swedish Bitcoin exchange company BTCX. And as an example of having like a digital single market, we are currently trying to expand to different European countries, and it's like crazy. If not impossible, close enough. And I'm thinking that we should also think about having the like financial regulations more unified within the European Union, so that we can like expand to all of EU without having to pay these enormous fees for applying for the regulations in the different countries. Also, as you mentioned earlier, that the PayPal doesn't exist in different countries, and that could be a problem for different kind of digital services. I think that could be solved pretty easily with like Bitcoin and different cryptocurrencies. So yeah, expanding our view to no like normal bank systems anymore, and thinking more of the alternative ways of payments.
Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with this as a company? I mean, clearly that's some sort of regulatory or policy impediment. I mean, you knew this from the outset, I guess, so was there sort of a bit of optimism, hope that things would change, or lobbying as a coalition of like-minded companies? I mean, how do you confront this? Because, you know, you clearly have a good business model, you don't want to stop.
Yeah, I mean, currently we're looking for investors to help us to pay these fees and go with it as the system is now. But we're also trying to lobby for politicians to make a change. One of our board members is also a member of the parliament in the Swedish government, so he's also working there to trying to make a change to this regulatory madness.
Yeah, it's a tough issue. I was 15 years in the European Parliament. I can tell you it's very difficult, European regulation. Too broad, too general, and often too far-reaching, and not looking and really creating this uniform market, but just it becomes each time more complicated. Each new regulation puts burden on the already existing one, because you can't get rid of these separations because national states don't want to. So in reality, you add more complications. But okay, there's always hope. Didn't somebody
have
say
hope.
this? There's always hope.
Well, Christian, you raised the digital single market in Europe, and so we're midterm through the Commission's review of how far we've come. So, and it was a pretty, I wouldn't say depressing, that's too far, but not an entirely, encouraging report. I mean, what are we doing wrong? What for Europe? So let's go back to Europe. How can we stimulate a better environment? How can we become like the US or Asia? What more can we do?
Well, I think we should maybe stop calling it a digital single market package if it's not delivering a digital single market, if it's delivering more fragmentation, more national rules, which is making it more difficult for a great innovative Swedish company to become big in Europe, big in the world. So maybe we should start sort of rejecting that tagline of digital single market proposals. And we see it in the audiovisual rules, we see it in the telecoms rules, in the e-privacy rules, in all of them, that they have elements that are actually going against what they're trying to achieve. E-privacy, will we be able to continue to have encrypted services, end-to-end encryption? It's not entirely clear. That's kind of weird from a privacy proposal. Audiovisual rules, where we'll go from you have one company selling to the rest of the world, rest of Europe, because they're registered in one EU country. Now they have to register in each EU member states. Maybe the same for online apps, Skype-type services. That's a lot more fragmentations. So we probably have fewer unicorns in the future, thanks to the digital single market proposal.
And I mean, also with the current copyright reform, that's also like a big issue for the digital single market right now. And I mean, as the state of it now, it looks like it's not even going to be better. Actually, it's going to get worse in many issues. So that's also a great issue.
Including rights, because it will have put more liabilities on platforms to sort of monitor what's going on in the networks and sort of kind of censorship, privatized censorship.
Maybe for those who have less information about what is going on, you can find this all when you go to the website of the European Commission. You will find the information. You go onto digital single market, and then you find many sub-legislation. So this is just a framework, the digital single market. It's a concept, and it's actually a beautiful concept, but then you have separate regulations and legislations below it, and some of them are as problematic as described. Not all of them are, so don't get us wrong here. It's not everything, it's negative. There are some very good proposals, but go and have a look at it, and you can still get involved. If you have an interest, there are many consultations still going on. Legislations are going to the vote in the House, most of them in the second half of the year, in the European Parliament, when I say House. So go and get involved, bring your examples there and talk about it. I think people need to hear. Somebody else who has similar experience and would love to talk about it? No? Okay. Any other topic? Burning, please.
Lucien Reuter from LIDIT, from the Luxembourg Institute for Digital Training. Coming back to the face recognition we said in the train station. If I build a roller coaster, I have somebody come to me and check if everything is fine, if the security rules are held in. Why not, if I'm a company and creating some IT stuff, why we don't create a framework or an institution which will be recognized in European and have to check the workflow, the processes, the data the company gathered and used before we said it's okay to use it. So maybe it could be an idea. It will be lots of work, and it will be maybe kill some ideas before they started. But it maybe could be a good idea to get more visibility to the people, so they knew, okay, if it said this signs on it, it will be checked, it was checked, and it will be okay, and have this, and this regulation in it.
I mean, I have a personal view. I don't know if you want to hear it, but I have a personal view about it. The trouble, it's not a bad approach. So typically, the national data officers should do this. So you, as a company, you should be able to go to them and say, look, can we have an open chat with you? Now, there are some, have big offices, and they might give you educated advice. Some are smaller, might not have so much insight into company practices. Sometimes you want to be careful as well, depending on your business model. But the second one, which I think is important, the trouble is they will always respond to what exists. So, but if you want to do something totally new and fresh, you might get an answer you don't want to hear, because you still believe that your model is okay and it's justifiable. So you have a kind of, do you always repeat what already exists in a market, or are you ready to look into something new and fresh which isn't there yet? It's a tough balance which you have to probably each time have to take, but that's my personal opinion, I don't know. You are in a new market segment, totally new.
Yeah, newish.
Yeah, relative, newish, but I mean, so what is your answer to this?
I kind of lost track a little bit there. No. So repeat the question, the specific.
The question was, how about having new companies going to somebody who is well educated and is from an official entity like government, which would be in the data environment, the national data agencies and officers. So is it a good idea? Would it help?
I don't know. It would depend.
Okay.
It depends.
It depends.
It's difficult to know how that would work out.
Okay. Christian?
I'm talking too much, sorry. But just quickly, I mean, of course, all companies have to abide to privacy rules, contractual rules, consumer rules, what have you, right? So probably what I imagine happens if you're a startup, you just have a great idea and you work, and then suddenly you realize, oh, we should probably check with a lawyer.
Yeah.
You probably don't have 3 lawyers saying, hey, we should do a startup. We should start, programming. Lawyers, they're not really good at that. But if you had to have sort of weights, so let's say you have a Swedish startup, they have a great idea, and then should they then sort of ask the authorities, hey, can you come by? And they'll say, okay, we can go by October 27th at 8 o'clock in the morning. Would that work for you? And you'll probably say, no. If we need an answer now, we need an answer this week, because else our competitors from Asia or wherever will have, already provided the service. So we should be a little bit careful with, having too many obstacles to innovation.
That's fine.
We have an example in the UK where the kind of thing you're talking about is working, and that is in some of the fintech incubators. They work with the Financial Conduct Authority in the Bank of England, who tells them whether the idea that they've got in the incubator environment is one that's going to meet the current banking regulations. And since if you're going to be in that space, you have got to obey by those regulations, that seems to me an area where it makes sense in sort of industry by industry, perhaps rather than generally.
Let's go back to the Swedish model first, because it's practically a response, and then we go to Switzerland.
Yeah, so since we're also in the fintech industry, we tried to do that at first, going to the financial inspector thing in our country. And basically the answer we got was just like, no, since you're handling Bitcoin, you're obviously criminals. So, so yeah, we had like a lot of fights with almost all of the Swedish banks that we wanted to have a bank account to be able to provide this service. And instead we just had to like roll with it and just start the service either way. And then after that prove that, yeah, we're not criminals. Here you can see all the bookings and everything like that. So in some cases, I think you just have to take a chance and then prove that the model that you're providing is the right one.
Yeah. You have a mic. Good.
I give just a positive story. In Switzerland, over the last 4 years, we've been developing a platform or a series of meetings between security experts and the emerging Internet of Things industry. In particular, I've been working in a consulting group of security experts to advise our Department of Energy about the new smart meters, which will be part of our new smart grid system. And as many of you know, as these Internet of Things devices have been created, we have horror stories of baby monitors being hijacked and things like this. the business model in the past has been, if you can avoid a cost, avoid it. And it means that many of these devices have been created without the ability to do remote updates, to have good security checks, and similar. About 4 years ago, we started as a group of security experts to advise the Department of Energy in Switzerland on how we expect the providers of these devices in Switzerland to pay attention to security aspects. And for these reasons, we looked very carefully at the parallel models already being developed in Europe. I don't hesitate to stress that Switzerland is not a part of the EU, but we benefit and participate at very many different levels with the European Union. The leading manufacturer of these devices in Switzerland was part of this consulting group. They listened carefully to what we said. And it turned out that, unbeknownst to us, they were already actively participating in a pilot program to certify their device with the French Internet of Things security testing agencies. And so, even though we weren't actually part of this process, I feel that first, that we had been urging this manufacturer to pay attention to these security aspects as they produce their device. And secondly, that this manufacturer, as a part of being able to sell their devices in France, was taking advantage of the security testing provided by the French government, and which I hope will be a model that will be developed in Europe. They benefited from our input, they took us seriously, and they were prepared then when they went to the French testing agencies to have their models certified. So I think it's a good example of how we in the internet community, we in the security community can talk to each other, can look for cooperation to provide best practices, and hopefully it means that our businesses will benefit because when they come to market, they'll have a much more solid product and they will gain the trust of the end consumers because they will be able to show that they have taken the care to have their products tested and certified.
One gentleman, maybe take him as last.
I think we have another question from
somebody, the gentleman over with the blue jacket.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Alon Bar. I just wanted to piggyback on the comment of the last commenter and about the need of sort of involving other stakeholders in thinking about product development. Can everyone hear me or is the mic?
Yeah, we hear you.
Right. I've noticed in talking to a lot of people who are working on technology products in the startup community that there doesn't seem to be much interaction between different groups within companies. For example, when you talk about engineers, designers, legal professionals, etc. So I think there is already some domains that need to be bridged in order to enhance people's understanding of how technology products may impact individuals. But more broadly than that, I think what also could be improved on is user research. I think a lot of companies, as they're starting out, they're very cash-strapped and they don't necessarily have the resources to think through how the products that they're developing may impact individuals. And the user research that is done, if it's done, is usually focused on trying to figure out, is there a business model here? But it doesn't necessarily encapsulate the certain risks that we were just talking about in terms of privacy and otherwise that are really important if you don't want to breach users' trust. So I think that area of users research and making sure that designing of products is done in a way that is user-centric is also really essential in this domain.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. A lot of companies are engineering-led, I mean, my own included. And then sort of privacy by design and human rights by design, those kind of processes are nearly second stage. So yeah. I wanted to pick on Gonzalo very quickly before we go to Thomas, maybe for a wrap-up. WARA, somebody mentioned incubators, so I was just curious about how WARA, for example, works. What sort of, how do you pretty much leave these companies to innovate by themselves, or do they seek mentorship from other government departments, or how does that incubator work?
Well, WIRA is part of the Open Future program of Telefonica, and it's basically targeting startups. We launch beauty contests in all the countries where we have operations and in some others as well. And basically we provide these startups with some little funding, but not also with that. We also provide them with support from the Telefonica professionals, which might help them to develop their business model with regards to regulation, marketing, so all the different abilities that you might have professionals at Telefonica are helping these little startups to run their business models. And we are not also leaving it there. We also have some earlier programs in this Open Future so we are trying to help these entrepreneurs even before they are a startup to try to define their business models and to, for example, present their proposals to the Wire Academy. We also have some venture capital that are investing also on some more developed startups so that they can make the next phase. So we have a rather wide initiative to help this innovation environment, and it's also can be coupled with some other initiatives from governments. So it's not a closed initiative. We also have this initiative open to other companies that want to participate as well in helping these startups. So we have a quite wide innovation approach to help companies not only where we have operations, but in some other countries as well.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, we were asking about what is kind of the environment that, the unicorns or whoever. I know there've been some suggestions about certifications, and I think we need to have a complete picture here. And I speak as a former chief legal advisor to NIST working on computer security and encryption, so very familiar with how this works. Let's be very clear. Certifications, if you want to talk about keeping the incumbent players in place, certifications are probably one of the best things that inhibit innovation. They have a role. I think we are only at the beginning of understanding how those certifications can work. I know you're aware of this. The moment you certify against a security standard, that standard is irrelevantly unsecure anyway, okay? I think we need to change the mindset of how we think about security, risk management. This is a work in progress. Everyone's learning how to do this. So be careful about assuming that going down the path of certifications is a way to do this. They have an appropriate role, but don't think that they're going to be the solution for solving a lot of these kind of things. And when I hear that one country's testing, what are they testing against? I hope they're testing against a global standard that allows everyone to compete along level playing fields. I'll leave the thought at that. The challenge is making sure that we are using global standards, global approaches. Let's not create impediments to market entry. We're seeing in some countries, particularly in Asia, that's starting to happen a lot with innovative technology products. So we need to fit the certification piece into a bigger picture about what we're trying to achieve.
Very good point. I think we're getting to the end, and maybe Thomas, good luck summarizing all this in a few key takeaways, but let's see what you have.
Thanks, Caroline. I'll just join my two moderators up here on the stage and would like to ask you to give them a big hand, because I thought they have done a great job this afternoon. Now, I have brought this upon myself by designing such an open session to kind of wrap up this very interesting discussion, which I must say I really much enjoyed, and I thought it was really great from the value of the statements that we've heard. So, I have identified 3 general topics on which we could give messages out from this session. The first one was touched upon in the very beginning and wasn't really contested, so I think it's easy to deliver the message: open source and permissionless innovation are central pillars for innovation on the internet, just like that. Do you agree, or is anyone not fine with this first key message? I will take that as a yes. Then I was thinking about putting the app stores up here, but it wasn't really discussed, so I erased that. And the second key message will revolve around personal data. Here we've had statements that we need a different approach, that there is a trust problem, that remarketing of old customer data is not a new business model really, and that customers have to know what is happening with their data. So this key message on personal data would read something like this. There is a need for a different approach as there is a trust problem. We need to gain customer trust, and the way to do this is by letting customers opt in and informing them what is actually happening to their data. Agreement on this point as well? You're an easy audience, thanks. So, third point, why is innovation in the EU not happening? We've heard that there is fragmentation. I've heard Christian say, stop calling it a digital single market if it isn't. We've heard there is over-regulation, that probably we need less regulation and not more regulation. And we've also heard that there is a need to understand network effects. This can't be taught in a classroom. And maybe Europe has not really understood how to actually put networks effect into business models. So the third message going out of this session from my point of view, and I of course like to say that coming from or speaking for a telco, is Europe is suffering from over-regulation. We need less regulation and not more. We need to understand network effects. And I'm not sure how to phrase it with the digital single market and the fragmentation. So maybe we can leave that out. We should say Europe is not happening because it's over-regulated and because we don't really understand the network effect. Any ideas on improving the third message? I'm not really sure if I got that correct here.
Maybe instead of a network effect, it's also about scale. If you had one single market, you would have one scale, you do one app, you do one success in Sweden, and you're European. You have more than 500 million consumers already, so it's about scale.
Having a true single market would help building network effects, maybe?
Would give you scale.
Scale and network. And
but if your product is no good and people don't want to use it, then you're not going to have scale, right?
Obviously.
And if you bring the question forward as well, not just the answer, then I would say I wouldn't say innovation is not happening in Europe, but it can't be scaled to a global scale, because I think innovation is happening a lot.
Very good point. Yes. Why is European innovation not reaching scale?
Can't scale to become global, or hardly ever can scale. Yeah.
Did I miss anything central? I mean, I know I missed the data ethics topic completely, but I thought the discussion is just starting here and it's really hard to already derive key messages, and we should maybe note that one down for a business innovation-oriented workshop next year at EuroDIG. I'd love to have a data ethics discussion, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So, let's call it a workshop. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.